All right, now, hi,
Now
Steph.
we're ready. Hi.
Hi. I'm so excited to have you here. And for those of you that are watching, being like, what is Elena doing again? I have another one of my fabulous clients who is here to share her journey to thriving and what that has looked like for her, what surprised her, just a conversation, because it's so much better explained in my client's words than my formal Humpty Dumpty words. So, Steph Pellish, would you like to introduce yourself and just tell people who you are, where you are, and one thing about you that people might not know or that you would like to be shared out in the world? How's that?
Sure. So I'm Steph, and I am this year with COVID trying to figure out, like many people, what's next and what's going on and who I am and what I want, all of the things, all of the big things. And so I have 4 kids ranging from 10 months to 10 years. And that keeps me really busy, but it also this year especially has made me realize that I need to take more time for myself and to figure out who I am outside of being a mom and a wife. And I expected to go back to work after the baby was born in January, and here we are 10 and a half months later, and I am still not back at work. So it's been a huge role shift that way, being a stay-at-home mom and figuring out what that means for me and how I feel about it. So
Yeah. Tell people the type of work that you did and maybe even a sense of, I don't know, what might be coming.
well, so I am an occupational therapist. I've been working in early intervention and with young kids for a long time. And last fall, I was kind of feeling burnt out just with being pregnant, with doing all of that. And so I thought, oh, have a baby, and then I'll figure out what to do next. And so I was kind of looking at some digital stuff, thinking I would go online some more. And then with the pandemic and being home with all the kids, that kind of got put on hold. And so now I'm kind of looking again. I actually, since you and I last spoke, had a colleague reach out and kind of offer me some work too. So I'm kind of exploring what that might look like. It would be, for right now, just kind of like more online kind of consulting and helping her with some projects. So I'm excited about that. But I'm also kind of hoping that I'm open to possibilities right now, is kind of where I'm at. Hoping that something shows up and I'll know it's the right thing and I go in that direction.
Okay. So on that note, what does thriving mean to you?
So thriving this year has really meant learning how to love myself and what that means. And it means really doing the things that mean taking care of myself without feeling guilty. Because as a mom and working and trying to be a wife and a friend and doing all of the things, a daughter, you know, I would take time to do something, but then I always had this huge sense of guilt, like I should be doing something else. And so this year I've really learned that thriving means taking care of myself and feeling good, and that I deserve to be taken care of, because I really can't show up for anybody else before I show up for myself.
Yeah. Okay. So what has helped you do that? What has helped you show up for yourself and give yourself that love so that you can thrive?
So part of it was you had reached out to me. So backstory is I am one of Elena's OGs from a long time ago. And so we did some coaching together for a while. And then, you know, I've continued to follow you, even though I wasn't doing coaching one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And this fall, you reached out to me at some point and said, I'm doing this group, curious Elena's favorite word, curious about what you think. And so I started looking at it, and I was really excited about doing it, but with the time and with the baby, I wasn't sure. And, you know, I found that it was really important for me to take the time because, especially with the baby who doesn't always have the best sleep schedule, finding time for myself, like the Thrive group has been really important to me because it is carved out time that I can say to my husband, you're in charge. I don't have to feel guilty. I know that I don't have to go get anybody, even if they're crying, because they all know that I'm in my meeting or whatever. And so that has really been helpful this year, that I have like something that's just mine.
Yeah,
And
I
then,
love that.
you know, in that group, we've talked a lot about like core values and what it is that we want. And so that's also given me some clarity. And one of the things that you and I talked about recently is like, okay, when I'm trying to make a decision or when I'm trying to think like, oh, does this fit? Using my core values and saying like, okay, well, what are my core values? Does this fit my core values? And I've used that a couple times, which has been very helpful and insightful.
Yeah, right. And it's so funny because it's such a simple thing that we have access to, and yet it can be hard to name the core values. It can be hard to believe that they can be used as a filter for discernment like that. So I appreciate that you gave yourself that opportunity, right? And for you, I mean, I remember when I think when I first reached out and asked if you were curious about Thrive Unleashed, or well, it's not, that comes later for Thrive Circle, right? It was well, because it didn't come automatically. Oh yeah, I can take a week. Yeah, I can take an hour for myself every Tuesday night, right? The first response, you
Yeah.
like many other people, is, well, I have my kids. That's bedtime. I certainly wouldn't, like, that's not realistic. But you sat with it for a little bit. And so that's huge, right? To give yourself that opportunity to say, this is important to me. Could I possibly make it work, right? And I know it wasn't easy.
Yeah. Well, and especially at that time, because at that time, Colby is my 10-month-old. So Colby was really struggling with going down for bed without me because I was nursing and I'm with her 24/7. And
Yeah.
so it actually kind of pushed my husband too to do bedtime more often and get comfortable with what that looked like. Because I know like the first couple times that we had our meeting, she would be screaming downstairs or screaming in her room and I could hear her. And so that guilt, but I was like, it's not my job right now. Like I get to focus on myself, and I know he's going to be frustrated, but I know that, you know, he can also handle it. And
Yeah.
so it was helpful in that sense too, because I mean, they have a great relationship, but it also like allowed him to like take ownership of that a little bit too, in a way that had I just been like, oh, I just need a break, and then she would have been crying and I would have gone in and done it anyway. So that was a good excuse for me to not just go in and do it.
Yeah. So you empowered both of them and
Yes.
yourself all at once. I love it. So we've talked a little bit about this, but do you think you can name something that was getting in the way of your thriving? Like what,
I
were
think
there
the guilt,
patterns or
yeah, I
guilt?
think the guilt was one of the biggest things. I think just feeling like, because then what would happen too, it was a vicious cycle. I would go and do something for myself, feel guilty about it, and then come home or go back into life, the everyday stuff, and then I would feel worse because now I feel like, well, I didn't even get refueled from that activity, or I didn't even get refueled from being away. And so it just continued that cycle versus now I'm like, you know, you still come back into it and it's, you're back into it. But I now can recognize that I'm allowed to enjoy it and I like can feel like I deserve it. And I think that's part of that self-love piece too.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So what is one thing that has surprised you on this journey? You're
I
like,
think,
what is it?
well, I think part of it is just like, I feel like one week I'm like, yes, like I get this. And then like a month later, I'm like, oh, I get this even more. Like how many layers it is. And when I'm like, no, I think I've finally gotten it. And then it's like, oh no, I did, but now I've got it even more. And the other thing too is like, you talk about too, like how much it's a process and how much it's a practice. Like all of this stuff is a practice. And sometimes putting the stuff, like even the simplest stuff, is hard to put into practice because, it's like, I know I should read that book, or I know I should do the meditation. And it's so much easier to just do something else, avoid it, or find something mindless to do instead of mindful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes to both of those, right? And I'm giggling because you, like many of our friends, right? A lot of us have this all or nothing thinking, right? We're so in, and then we fall off the wagon, and then it's that getting back on. But what you described is also this, I'm in, I've got it, this practice is becoming something that I can integrate and I feel embodied around. And then, wait a minute, why am I here again? And what I heard you say is you've now recognized that just is part of the process, and it becomes an additional opportunity to go deeper into that. And that's massive, I would offer.
Yes. So this week, we spoke last week, and I'll say we, but I kind of had a challenge for myself to read a book. And honestly, like it's just been one of those things that I keep picking it up and I'm looking at it and I'm just not mentally, it's not a heavy book, but it's a book for work. Like it's a serious book, a nonfiction book. And I just can't get into it. And I'm like, well, I challenged myself that I would do this reading. And then finally, like 3 days into it, I'm like, you know what? I just can't read this book right now. And so I went with a fiction book, and I picked something that I normally wouldn't pick, but I've just been reading a fiction book. Whereas normally I would be like, well, I failed. See, I didn't do it. I didn't read it. But instead this time I was like, well, you know what? Maybe like I do still want to read that book, but I'm shifting like my goal, and that's okay because I've learned from Elena that that's okay because it's where I'm at right now. I'm not in a place where my downtime looks like wanting to sit down and spend 10 minutes reading about the neuroscience of the brain. Right now, I need 10 minutes to read about, it's just a fiction, not a,
Yeah.
I don't even know what to call it, but yeah. So, and I'm giving myself credit for taking the time to read.
And that to me, I love that. Thank you. And what a great check-in of what's working.
Yay.
Yay. Right. But so I'll just reflect back to you that you're building a muscle around a habit of, I want to read every day. Right. And you're right. I remember when we had this conversation, like, okay, so do you have a book? And you automatically went to the workbook, in part because you were thinking about work things, right? You're thinking about these next steps. So it makes sense. But there is this place of sometimes, right? We've talked about turtle steps. What's the smallest step? And sometimes it's that thing that it doesn't have to have a reason. I just want to read this thing for fun. And that still moves towards the goal of reading every day. You can add in, the focus of what you're reading later. But right, the most important part of this habit is the everyday or however many times a week reading, right?
Well, and realistically, the times I get to read are normally after the kids go to bed. And by that point, I'm tired.
Yeah.
And
right?
everybody in my house is up early. And so I love to get up early. I love to get up before the kids. But with Colby's sleep schedule, and she gets up at night, and it just is not a reality right now. And so hopefully one day I can get back to like my early morning, but reading something serious at night right now is just, it's too much.
I was remembering the other day that when we first started, when I was a baby coach, we would talk at like 5:30 in the morning.
5:30, 6 a.m. Yeah.
Right. And I was like, oh, and I remember actually thinking, I wonder if that's of interest to Steph again, but then see Colby, we're going to appreciate Colby's.
Yeah. Well, my 8-year-old likes to get up at 6 too. So,
Yeah.
everybody starts moving then after that.
Right. I mean, that's one thing is yes, my 16-year-old, see, it does change. It reverts to much later. But now we have the dog who's like, whoop, you're up. So what has been, I think you've alluded to this, but I like being explicit about things. What has been the biggest shift for you that if you were to really boil it down to like one thing, what would be that thing that has been like the domino that maybe has created other ripples?
Well, so I feel like you just asked me two separate questions, just in the sense like, what was the domino?
I did. You're right.
We had, throughout the weeks of the Thrive Circle, we came up with like a power statement. And so that has been something that I remind myself of what my power statement is. I have it written on an index card on my mirror, so I see it every day. I have it memorized. I know it. And even when I'm not like putting it necessarily into practice in that moment, I'm remembering what that is. And so part of that is the self-love that I was talking about, part of my power statement. And so that has, my self-love has definitely been the biggest shift over the last few months, with a big shift last week in particular. So
I love it. Thank you for just noticing that I did indeed ask two questions and answering both of them. Well done. There's multi-step directions when I was a classroom teacher. There you go.
All right, I'll put up my gold star for myself.
Right? Very well done. So you have decided to embark on the Thrive Unleashed journey, which has kind of, for the early birds, it started already and then kicks off formally in January. What are you looking forward to most about that?
I think just continuing what we started, but really, like I said, everything has multiple layers. And so I feel like I've gotten these ideas, but now I would really like to, I want to say assimilate them. I guess that's the right word, but really get them to be more a part of my life versus thinking like, okay, I need to remember my power statement because that's what's going to help me love myself or whatever. That just becomes part of who I am and part of what I do more naturally. And so being in the Thrive Unleashed, I feel like is going to naturally put those pieces in for consistency.
Yeah, I love that. Right. So that idea of kind of integrated embodiment, right? Where it's one thing to
Integrated. I like that's probably the word I was looking for.
fabulous. See, together. It's a co-process. So what would you say to somebody who realizes, right, that they aren't taking care of themselves, are perhaps struggling with guilt around doing that and around believing that they are worthy of that, and might be interested in a program like Thrive Unleashed or even Thrive Circle, which for anybody that's curious, will start in the spring. But has all sorts of stories around why it wouldn't be a good fit.
I've also had all of those stories, the money, the time, the kids. One of the big things this year is I'm not working. And so putting a value on what I'm doing at home and putting a value on what I can do for myself was really important this year. I feel like I struggle with this question because I'm probably preaching to myself more than anyone, right? Because I struggle with like, well, is it worth it? Is it going to be like worth the money? I've got to put up a lot of money for this. It's going to be a lot of time. Am I really going to follow through with it? And so I have all of those questions. And with Thrive Circle, I feel like the accountability for it, we had our journals, like I feel like having the tangible pieces for me were really helpful. And so, and again, like the accountability and the group is great. Like this group is phenomenal. We met without Elena this week. just for fun, just to catch up and hold each other accountable and say a check-in. Um, and so again, like putting it into practice and doing it is definitely an investment. And I'm learning to invest in myself and what that means. So I would encourage everyone else to do the same, or just kind of explore what that might look like.
I love that. Thank you. Right. And thank you for being real in terms of, I still have those questions, right? But we all do. I mean,
Mhm.
right. So I have my own coach. I'm in a mastermind, and I invested pretty significantly in myself for that. And it's kind of that. And there's also this very fine line. And I've probably said this, I don't think I've said this to you, but I've said this to other people of, a program isn't for you if you're thinking, ooh, I must do this to fix X, Y, or Z, right? And I know that's a filter I use for myself. If I am drawn to something because I think it's going to be a quick fix,
Mhm.
then it is time for me to like run the other direction, because I'm never going to get anything. I'll get some things out of it, but it's not going to be, I'm not going to be curious around it, right?
Right.
Whereas there's things that I'm curious about. I think, ooh, right, there's something about this energetic component or that accountability piece, and those pieces that I'm like, oh, all right, let me look under all the pieces and see if it fits in my core values, and does this feel right, right? And
Yeah.
notice not from my head, but from my heart and from my gut, and that whole inner teacher thing that occasionally I talk about. uh, but it's very real to continue to have those questions, right? And I think
Right.
saying otherwise is not real.
Well,
But
and I just kind of want to piggyback off that for a second, because when we met the other night, we were kind of talking about like what got us in, or why we each decided to go into Thrive Unleashed. And one of the things that came up is like, I think so often, like we want to invest in something that we know has a tangible outcome. Like especially, like I said, I'm not working. So I feel like I should invest in something that's going to help me find work and get work and be productive in work. And so this kind of challenges that, like, no, I need to invest in myself. And then hopefully, you know, things will happen because of that or whatever. But it's showing up for myself, just for me, instead of showing up for myself so that I can have some kind of
yeah,
tangible outcome.
I love that you all talked about this. Now I wish I was a fly on the wall in that room. Oh my goodness, how fun. So all right, now I know which questions to ask. Steph, is there anything else that you would like to share, that as you think about your journey, you either wish you could go back and tell yourself, or something, that has stuck out to you that you want to offer to everybody?
I mean, I think that it's just really important to have a coach or somebody there to support you and guide you, because I love self-help. I love the growth. I love the development. I love it all. Um, you can read so many books, you can watch so many videos, but when we're in a one-on-one session or when we're in a group, we do breakout groups, and it allows you, or allows me, to really have a place to talk it through individually. And so I can read a book, but then like talking to you about it then makes it more impactful for me. And I can talk about, hey, Elena, this is what I'm thinking from this book. And then you can hold me accountable, or you can remind me like, hey, Steph, remember when you told me you were going to read? Yep. Hmm. And so we can talk about it, but it also gives me somebody where, um, like when I'm struggling, I can say, this is why I'm struggling, or this is what's going on. Like, can you give me an outside perspective? And you already have, like, what my core values are, what is going on. So I have somebody who's a great sounding board, because I appreciate you very much. And you are a great sounding board. And so, I mean, I would recommend finding somebody, whether it's Elena or somebody else that maybe is a better or a different fit. Um, but I really feel like the individuality, there we go, is really important, and has been really key for me this year, especially. So
Oh,
thank you for
thank
that.
You're welcome. And thank you for that, for allowing me to be that sounding board and that person, and for you showing up for yourself in such big ways. So thank you, thank you, thank you. How can people follow you if they wanted to?
So that's a loaded question at the
Uh,
moment.
all right.
Well,
So you don't have to. I
no,
know.
so I do. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Autism and Play, where I talk about autism and play. I work with moms who have kids on the autism spectrum, and one of the big things that we talk about is how to create functional play, what play looks like, and how to play really with your kids. Something that I've also kind of started recently is on Instagram. I also am Parenting is Hard Enough, because parenting is hard. Being a mom is hard. And so it's just kind of my place to say, like, parenting is hard enough. And then you can't see behind me, but our elf brought snowballs and had a snowball fight in the playroom. And so, you may see a picture that says parenting is hard enough, and then the elf shows up with snowballs. Parenting is hard enough, and then my dishwasher breaks. So it's just like, it's already hard, and then life happens. And it's just kind of, I'm just kind of exploring it and seeing, that's what Elena was kind of alluding to, where it might go. But for now, I'm just kind of letting it be my place to document my struggles of being a mom and a wife.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for letting me nudge you a little bit. I don't ever do that. I don't. Thank you,
No.
thank you, thank you, Steph, for sharing yourself with me and with everybody else. I
You're
truly
welcome.
appreciate you.
And I appreciate you.
Yeah, and everybody, if you have questions, either for me or for Steph, we will check comments and get back to you. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.